So I don't know about you and mornings, but it has always been the hardest thing in the world for me to start my day. And I'm going to describe what it feels like for me on just any given day. But as I'm describing what it feels like for me from the moment that I wake up, I want you to think about what does it feel like for you most mornings when you open your eyes? I want you to think about the sensation in your body. And I got to pull some cat hair out of my mouth first because I've been petting my cat. Okay. Whenever I would wake up, no matter where I was, the first thing I felt was a sensation of heaviness. It's almost like there's always been something standing on my chest. And it goes from that sensation of heaviness, like the bed is a giant magnet and I'm just a little paper clip that's now stuck to it. The amount of effort that it takes for me to push through that heaviness in my body and that sense of dread, it is like Herculean. Forget about doing resistance training. Like this is pushing through something at a whole different level. And once I feel that sensation of dread, of course, what happens is then bing, it triggers my mind to start spinning. And I start to scan ahead. And, even though I'm a very positive person, one of the things that I've been learning about life is that our brains tend to default on the negative. So what is it that I immediately start thinking about? Oh, the thing I did wrong yesterday, the things I have to do today that I'm not going to get to, or that I'm nervous about, the meeting at work that I'm not prepared for, the fact that the kids have all this stuff going on, the fact that I haven't exercised in 4 days and now I'm kind of beating myself up, or that maybe I stayed up a little bit too late and watched yet one more episode of that series instead of going to bed. And so the very first thing I feel is heaviness. The very first thoughts aren't like, oh, let's get out of bed. I'm so grateful I have another day. It's more like, oh, just like, ugh. And that's what I'm working with. And it doesn't matter if I'm on vacation. It doesn't matter if I'm in my house. It doesn't matter if I'm traveling for work. It doesn't matter where I am. That is what I feel. And what I've come to learn is that's the way most of us feel. That there's something about going from a state of peace and rest to waking up and having to face the day. And if you're somebody who doesn't sleep well at night, holy smokes. Let's just add on top that kind of disappointment that yet again, you didn't get another good night's sleep. So you're not waking up rested. You're waking up feeling behind. And so that's the background here. And if you're somebody that just springs out of bed, like, God bless you. But the rest of us kind of hate you right now because that's not the normal feeling for a lot of us. But I'm here to tell you, by the time you're done listening, you are going to not only understand why you feel that dread and why your thoughts can be really negative and why it can be hard to push yourself out of bed and start the day. Even better than understanding it, you're going to know exactly what to do on those mornings when you feel it. And I will tell you, based on personal experience, using this technique called slithering has changed my flippin' life, because it has changed what my body feels first thing in the morning. And it has given me this simple, seemingly ridiculous thing to do to help me on those mornings where it truly is hard to get out of bed. So I want to go back in time, like 3 or 4 years, and explain what was happening when I was talking to my therapist, the extraordinary Ann Davin, about all of the challenges I was facing. And I'm not going to belabor it because then it's going to get too damn depressing. But we were in the middle of massive life change. Like so many of you, our family had moved. And we moved from Boston, where we had lived for 26 years, up to this tiny little town in southern Vermont. And at the time, we were living with my mother-in-law. Now, I love my mother-in-law. But, when you are sleeping at your mother-in-law's house, you're not in your own bed. You are in somebody else's house. And I was sleeping in the bunk room of my mother-in-law's house in southern Vermont. And we're in the middle of this big move. I have no friends. I have lost my dream job, which at the time was being a daytime talk show host. And I just didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I felt like I had made a huge mistake by moving to this tiny town and uprooting our whole life. And on top of all of that, I'm waking up in the middle of the desolate winter months in a bunk room in my mother-in-law's house. And let me tell you, I would wake up every morning and it wasn't just the elephant on my chest. It was like, I don't even want to face the nightmare my life has become. I don't want to get out of bed. If I just roll over, have you ever had a morning where you're like, okay, if I just hit the snooze button and then I drift back to sleep, maybe I will wake up in a totally different life. Maybe this is like just some sort of figment of my imagination, this life of mine. This used to happen to me in law school all the time. I would have this fantasy that as I would drift back to sleep, I would wake up and suddenly I wouldn't be in law school anymore. I'd be 10 years ahead. I would be happy. I would have known what I was doing with my life. I'd have it figured out. And then, of course, I'd drift back to sleep. The alarm would ring. I'd wake back up. I'd be like, oh my God, this again? And now I'm late for class? Like, anyway, I could talk for hours about how hard it has been for me to get out of bed and how awful it is to wake up and the first thought that you have is that you've done something wrong or that someone's mad at you or that the day is just so overwhelming, you don't know how you're going to get through it. That's not that empowering. That doesn't feel good. And so, I'm going through this really challenging period where I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm so stuck. I don't feel like we made the right decision. I don't think I'm going to make it. And I'm sobbing to Anne on the phone. And I'm talking about how I just am having such a hard time getting out of bed. And Anne says, Mel, I want you to try something called slithering. So Anne and I spend one of our sessions talking all about the sensation. And that's why I asked you to think about, what do you feel in your body first thing in the morning? Is it heaviness? Is it dread? Is it excitement? Is it like an on edge feeling because you don't quite know what you're going to wake up to? And so as we started to unpack the sensation and the experience of waking up, she started asking me these questions. When do you remember this first starting? And I'm like, I have no idea. She's like, what about when you were in law school? Was it there? I'm like, most definitely in law school. What about college? Yep, absolutely. What about high school? Yeah. As a matter of fact, I had a really hard time getting out of bed in high school. I always felt this sensation like something was wrong. And we went all the way back in our conversation to this moment that I remembered where I'm going to not go deep into the story because I don't want things to get too heavy. I mean, it's already heavy to get out of bed. But we went all the way back to this experience that I had where I was in fourth grade and my family was away at this ski trip with a bunch of other families. And all the kids were sleeping in this big bunk room. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night. Here I am, a fourth grader. And there is an older kid on top of me. And they're doing something to me. And it was a really, I don't know what the right word is, weird and upsetting and confusing situation. Because it's like on one hand, I was really scared because it was pitch dark and I didn't know what was happening. But on the other hand, and this may sound a little weird, like it felt like, okay, like kind of good. I was so confused. I was not, as a fourth grader, able to process what was going on. Like my first ever sexual experience in that setting, being woken up. And I remember just rolling over on my side, like into this ball shape. And this older kid, climbed out and went back. And I looked over, and in the bottom bunk next to me was my little brother. And I remember thinking, I need to keep really quiet so that this person doesn't do that to him. Like I knew something was wrong, but as I reflect back on it, it's not that the first experience was terror or fear. It was more confusion and this deep sense that this was really bad. But again, like my fourth grade little brain, I didn't know like what was happening. I didn't know how to process this in a healthy way. And so that next morning, when I woke up, what do you think I felt in my body? Heaviness, dread. I felt like I had done something wrong. And I laid in that bed and pulled the covers over me and just hid there until all the kids had left, because I just sensed that I had done something wrong. And one of the things that I've learned talking to the extraordinary experts that we've had on this podcast that you and I are together learning from is that when you're really little, there's this flaw. I'm going to call it a flaw. There's a flaw in human design called attribution. I learned this from the amazing psychiatrist at Stanford, Dr. Paul Conti, that when you're little and bad things happen, or the adults around you are super mad or frustrated, or they're not around at all, a little kid does not have the ability to attribute other people's bad behavior to other people. There's a flaw in the human design that makes little kids attribute other people's bad behavior to a flaw in you. And so I actually thought this was my fault. I thought something was wrong. And I thought if I tell anybody, I am going to get in a lot of trouble, even though I didn't do anything. I was clearly a victim. And I'll just state for the record, also, my personal opinion about that other kid is if that other kid is doing something like that to a kid, then clearly somebody is doing that to him. And so I know that now. But in that moment, in my body absorbed that experience. And I'm going to tell you something. What I've learned over and over from all these experts that you and I talk to on this podcast, and from my own deep experience in therapy and all kinds of different modalities and diving deep into trauma, that there are things that happened to you when you were little or in your lifetime. And what I am learning over and over is that it's actually stored as a sensation in your body. And if it is your default to wake up and have negative thoughts, or it's your default to wake up and feel that heaviness the way that I do, it might not be something as like scary as what happened to me, but it could just be that you had a parent or a caregiver that you never knew which version of them you were going to get in the morning. Like, is mom or dad going to be in a good mood? They're going to be in a bad mood. We going to have food today? Or are we not going to have food today? Am I going to have a good day at school, or am I going to get bullied like I normally do? Am I going to be able to do what I need to do in this classroom, or am I going to sit there because I have a learning disability that nobody's figured out, and so I feel like the dummy in the classroom and I'm constantly in trouble? And all of these experiences create sensations in your body where you're bracing, or you are freezing, or you're in fight or flight. Why does it have to feel so heavy? And so I'm having this conversation with my amazing therapist, and I'm crying like crazy, and we trace it all the way back, and now it makes perfect sense. Of course, if I have that kind of experience, that the act of waking up gets married with the experience. Using this technique, I have been able to really move this heaviness out of my body. I've been able to get the elephant off my chest. And I have also been able to nurture and support myself in those mornings where the thoughts start spinning and it's super negative. And I guarantee you, if you try this, this will help you. So I'm talking to Anne, and she says, Mel, we establish that this is something that's a pattern. It's a stored sensation from trauma that is in my body, that this is super normal. It's super common, and there is something you can do. And so she asked me, just like I asked you, to think about where in my body is this thing stored and what does it feel like? And as I've described to you, it always is this sensation in my chest, and it's this heaviness, this sort of like dark cloud thing, like tar that is like right in there, stuck in my chest. And I want you to think about, where is it in your body? It might be in your ankles, might be on your back. It might be up in your head. Like, it could be anywhere in your body that you feel this sensation. And then Anne said to me, I am going to teach you, Mel, how to move this thing out of your body. And she said, I don't want you to push yourself out of bed. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to force myself through the heaviness. She said, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to move with the heaviness. I'm like, what do you mean? Am I just going to like melt into the bed? Because that's what it feels like. I'm supposed to just like disintegrate into the sheets. It's so heavy. She's like, oh, no. You are going to slither out of bed. You're going to move with the heaviness, Mel. And you are going to slither and slide one foot out of that bed. And then you're going to slither and slide the other foot. And then you're going to roll off the bed. And then I'm like, well, what am I going to do once I roll out? You're going to be on the ground. and you're going to move around with this heaviness. And I'm like, that sounds odd. And Anne has this amazing way of being so compelling that I tried it. And I'm going to walk you through it. It is unbelievable how this thing works. So what I wanted to do to make sure that you really understood this is I reached out to Anne and I said, hey, Anne, would you be willing to just send me a voice memo to really help me explain this technique and how you came up with this and why this works? And so I'm absolutely honored to be able to introduce you to my therapist, Ann Davin, and to have you get to experience her wisdom as she is going to explain to you exactly what slithering is. Anne is extraordinary. She has been a psychologist for over 30 years. She has a PhD in depth psychology, a master's in clinical psychology. All of her work focuses on the unconscious mind and how it impacts the human experience. And I have had the honor of working with Anne for over 4 years now, and she's changed me from the inside out. And I also just want to take a moment and thank you, Anne, because what you're going to share today is truly going to help people's lives. I just know it. So thank you. And so here's a clip that she recorded for you to explain what slithering is.
Slithering isn't a formal technique that is taught. You won't find it in someone's lecture or course book. It's an example of somatic inquiry. The beauty of somatic inquiry is that it bypasses trying to make sense of what we are feeling. Rather, we let the body speak its mind through movement. Sometimes it's better to feel our way through rather than try to figure our way out.
I want to make sure you heard that last line that Anne said. That sometimes it is better for you to feel your way through a sensation rather than trying to figure your way out of it. Do you ever have those mornings where you just don't want to get up? Me too. You know, in fact, for most of my life, every morning when I woke up, I just felt this huge sense of dread. I mean, I don't know why it was so hard to get out of bed. So I talked to my therapist about it, and she gave me this life-changing technique.